sorry, Economic Development Committee meeting here Thursday the 23rd at 1 p.m. at the Great Hall. I'll call roll. Council McLaren
Present.
is here, and myself, Ron Marson. With us today, joining us today is Economic Development Director, Mr. McLeod. Sorry, Jack Wilson. Sorry, and Paul O'Neill, our City Solicitor. A motion to accept the agenda.
So moved.
Thank you. Public participation. Councilor Santos is walking in now, so public participation. We have no one here to participate with us this afternoon, so thank you, Councilor, for making it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Hi, guys.
We just started. The first order of business on the agenda, the next order of business will be the partnership with the Merrimack Valley Planning Commission. So this is where the mayor spoke the other night with his address, saying how we were going to partner with them and how it was going to benefit us. And that's why we asked Mr. Wilson to join us here today. So if you could help us with that, sir.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to be here to talk about just this one element of a very robust relationship that the city enjoys with the Merrimack Valley Planning Commission. They are, as I referred to them before, another tool in our chest, an economic and community development tool chest. And they provide technical assistance in a whole host of areas. What the mayor was speaking about earlier this week was updating the city's zoning ordinance, which is, to be kind, is dated. It doesn't reflect uses and types of businesses that we see today, life sciences, high-tech, life sciences, as well as the other bio-related industries that the zoning code didn't contemplate and, quite frankly, didn't exist when the zoning ordinance was created. And so the Merrimack Valley Planning Commission stands uniquely positioned because they've done it before to offer us the expertise to help get us where we need to be in the 21st century, not just the 20th century, with respect to the zoning code.
And that'll help our building department and commissioner more, because when someone comes to apply for a permit for a certain business and it doesn't even state what's applicable, if that business isn't applicable in our zoning, he has to make that determination on his own. So that takes all that
subjectivity out of it.
Correct.
That's exactly
It'll
what it
make
does.
it
I mean, I think that the building commissioner here, they've historically been prudent in the interpretation, but because of how old the code is, it's subject to too much interpretation, too much subjectivity. Another example that's not related to that is not related to life sciences is something as simple as we see Amazon is a phenomenon of the last 20 years, right? And they have fulfillment centers. We don't have a fulfillment center defined. We have warehouses. We're not a fulfillment center. Is the distinction? Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. So those questions that go all the way from the sort of most fundamental uses all the way up to the high-tech life sciences will all be dealt with with the help of the Planning Commission. So we're looking forward to that. But we actually do. I mean, they've helped us. They worked with us on the accessory dwelling unit work that we did to be in compliance. They're going to work with us on similar to the ADU, which is a state law that's imposed on the communities to have to redraft their regulations to reflect the state law. Same thing with the clean energy, small clean energy, allowing for that as of right in certain areas. So they're helping with all of that as well, the Planning Commission.
And the ADU, with their help, it helped a lot, for us to make a few rules more strict for us so that we could, keep it under control. And we've only issued approximately under 40 permits so far, so it's not like we got this big influx.
Flood. Anyway. We did get, I think we have more in terms of the Planning Commission's service area. We're up there in terms of the number of applications. But the point is I think they're making is, and I agree, is that they were critical. We had several dozen meetings, right, with a group of us to get where we are today, and the Planning Commission was there every step of the way.
Thank you. Right, just so people would understand what that meant, and and how it's going to help our zoning, and to clarify things and less ambiguity. So,
question. So, obviously, there are many ADUs out there that were done without license. Is there any way we can work with those homeowners to have a more affordable way to have those ADUs into code?
I'd have to defer it to the folks in Health and Human Services and Inspections. that department oversees that world. The planning department was helpful in putting together the ADU regulations and rules, but as far as enforcement and working directly with individual homeowners and applicants, that's done through the Inspectional Services Office.
Thank you.
I can only say from personal experience, I know someone that did come that had a unit that wasn't in compliance, and they did work with them. It wasn't like they said, throw the people out, you can't have it. They said, how do we work with you to get it in compliance? So it's not like the city's not helping people do it. So because
It's also the intent of the law was to make it easier, not more difficult for accessory units.
Because I know there's a lot of constituents that they are in that position and they are afraid to come forward because they feel that because it wasn't done properly, they're going to just go to another whole remodelation. So they have to basically destroy what already have been done and rebuild it again. So that's why I wanted to bring it up.
So if you want.
So I guess there's two parts to your question. So as we further implement the ADU changes, we are going to have a grandfathering period where people who have not had inspections but had a previously permitted in-law apartment or other type of apartment, and there are a good number of those, but may have no longer used it or may have not kept it up to code because, say a relative was living there and died and then they sort of weren't using it anymore, will have the opportunity to come forward and have an inspection done and get up to par. Depending on what they're going to do with it, they may need to make changes. So if they're going to continue to just use it for non-rental family use, then it may not trigger the need to make a lot of changes. But if they say that they want to rent it, or when and if they want to rent it, they will need to come up to code for that. And so we will work with them to do that. I don't think those letters have gone out yet, but they will go out shortly from Health and Human Services telling people about that, so that if you had one, and in years past, the way that it worked here, and in many communities, there were actual ZBA decisions on that were recorded, like at the Registry of Deeds, saying you've been granted, an in-law apartment or whatever. And so we do have a list of those people that historically had one and just haven't. You're supposed to have had an annual inspection every year. But of course, as people died and maybe they weren't using it anymore, people sort of fell off and didn't do those inspections. So they'll have the opportunity one time during the grandfathering period to say, yeah, no, I actually want to have an inspection and have this certified as an ADU. Either I'm not going to rent it or I'm going to rent it, and that will determine whether or not they have to bring it up to code. If you're renting, you definitely have to comply with the full building code and the full sanitary code. But we're trying to, as the chairman indicated, work with people so that they don't have to, rip out kitchens and things like that. But they do have to be code compliant if they're going to rent them and not just use them for like a free family use or an au pair use or something like that. I mean, they can always come forward later. It's just that they may have to go through the whole process again if they don't do it initially. So.
All right, I want to stop the conversation there about ADUs. Jack brought it up, so I was, it's not on our agenda to speak specifically of that, but it's in part of the code compliance. That's why I have general questions about it. So thanks, Jack. The next order of business is the discussion of how this committee can help the building department with permit enforcement. So I put this on here, and after speaking more in depth with our solicitor, he's saying that we have tools, the building department has tools already to do that. So if you could just elaborate a little bit.
Well, so I haven't had a chance to speak to the building commissioner yet about what his specific issue is, but this, to my knowledge, has not been an issue when working with Gene Walsh, who was there before. There didn't seem to be a huge impediment to, there's a couple different routes. There's the civil route. They have the ability to issue fines under state law, under the state building code, both on the health side, on the sanitary code side, and also on the building code side. When we have areas where folks are, repeat offenders or they're refusing to come into compliance, we have the ability to take them to court civilly. Those will come to my office, and we can either file a civil action in housing court, or we can also file criminal complaints, and we've done both of those on various occasions. It doesn't happen that often. We're usually pretty successful avoiding that with the building department. So he may be referring to the fact that in terms of fines, people are sometimes not as compliant when they're fined with actually paying those fines. And so there are a few things we're working on to try to streamline that process. One of which is the city is supposed to have a municipal hearing officer, and it's a position that isn't really filled right now, so that people, if they are fined, can appeal on an administrative level. And so we'll be incorporating that function into the legal department office, not as a full-time, but one of the existing staff will cover that issue, so that that process will be more streamlined. So when they issue fines and people appeal, they can have a hearing before somebody in the legal department. If they don't like the result of that, they can then take that to a superior court review, and that's a separate process, and that will apply to other areas too, like in health department fines and things like that. The other thing we're going to work on is making sure that the process for adding these fines that are unpaid to people's tax bills is understood and it clearly in place, and because we do have the ability as a city to do that under state law, and so some of that was occurring years ago, is not as occurring cleanly as it should now. So we're going to work on that process and make sure that if we can't collect them through other means, that they'll end up on your tax bill, and they will eventually get paid that way. Because if they're levied, they should be paid. And I will say sometimes, obviously, the legal department has the ability to negotiate and settle cases. So, sometimes that's appropriate to ask that fines be reduced or to resolve a case. We usually do that only working, with the approval of the building department, also Health and Human Services if it's health code violations. So, those are the things that we're working on. And I think they probably are what I know he was interested in, the hearing process and making sure that that was available as well. So those are two things that we're working on to make sure that we have a better system to sort of address things in-house if we can. Court's always a last resort. We like to avoid that because it takes up a lot of time, not only for us, but if we are in court, then we have to bring the inspectors with us. And that takes them off the street. So we do everything we can in the legal office to make sure people are out there able to do their jobs. And if we have to go to court, we try to do it instead of bringing them.
All right. And before the next meeting, which will probably be within 2 weeks or something, if you can speak to the commissioner, and I will also, to see, and we can resolve that, to see what his issues are and how we can help him.
Yes, certainly we'll do so.
Yep. Thank you. So another thing, the next item is how we can help, how this committee can help when a new business applies to the city for a business permit, so that if they need help, if they need, and I know a new person in the department, your department is going to help with this, but how we as a committee, like if they need help, even when it comes down to an open house or a grand opening, or how does all that happen? And I know we're going to work with them to try to get building permits and licensing permits streamlined a little bit. I just don't know how we would go about when someone applies. So I don't know if it's through the building department or.
Well, you're speaking to the new economic development coordinator's position that's been created and actually filled and be starting on Monday, May 4th, which we're very excited about. And that's when I read this agenda item, that's exactly what came to mind, because that person will be charged with, and she's coming into the position with the experience here in the city and in inspections and in permitting. So that's going to be a hit the ground running opportunity for the city. And my view is that if we're doing it well out of our office in terms of the administration, members of the council, not just committee members, but all members of the council will be kept informed, whether it's on the beginning of at a groundbreaking, at the end with a ribbon cutting, and everything in between in terms of the permitting. my experience has been when a counselor gets a call from a constituent or concern from an applicant, calls made to me, and we sort of go from there. And it may not be my office or my department, but part of the function of this new economic development coordinator is be able to have their tentacles over in all other departments, whether it's building, sanitary code, conservation, whatever it is that has to sign off, police, fire, that'll be a very big part of that person's responsibility. So if we're doing it right, you're not finding yourselves as members of the council having to do any real heavy lifting for the application process. You're simply getting on your phone and saying, Jack or Paula, who's coming on board, how are we doing? I'm hearing this. And by the same token, I think sometimes it's good for us to know at the staff level that we can reach out to individual counselors with respect to your individual constituents who are in the system, and being able to sort of give you assurances that things are being done.
So I'm going to also ask that coordinator for the next couple of meetings to, attend our committee meetings to give us updates and help us and see what they're doing and how it's going, and if there's anything we can do to help.
I think it'd be great.
I think it's
ask
great.
you let her get her feet wet a little bit and
more
some transitioning
communication.
her out of inspections over here. And so I think maybe within a month or so after she starts, it'd be a good opportunity to have her come in and be sort of more grounded in the environment.
Yep. Thank you. The next item is how do we ensure, so the mayor, and I know we Tuesday we disposed of the Pleasant Valley School and the Courier School back to the city now, and now we're going to go out to an RFP, I believe, is what I'm hearing. But and we're hearing that it's going to be for senior housing, and for veteran housing, is what he said again Tuesday night. I'm sure we heard it.
Correct.
We don't have any. How do we assure it, or we don't have any assurance that that's what it's going to be for without the input from the mayor, Mr. Solicitor? Do you know?
So
Or is that just a goal?
So before those go out for RFP, we're in the exploration stage right now, and I think we're going to be working with. I think Kathleen said
Mass Housing Partnership.
Yeah, Mass Housing Partnership, to develop some feasibility plans as to what could feasibly go there. And I think that the plan is to try to, create some parameters around what would be appropriate there before we issue any kind of RFP, because they're both in neighborhoods. So we don't want to.
Courier, really. The Courier is in a very
Well, the
dense,
Courier is
and
very
it's-
small.
And it's a small building,
Exactly.
and it's very dense.
I think that's
around.
going to be probably a rehab into 4 or 5 condos. It's very
The most.
tiny.
And,
Right,
and the
it's
Pleasant
small.
Valley School has also got serious structural issues. So,
Yeah.
but to the point that the solicitor made about Mass Housing Partnership, they have, it's a quasi-public agency, they have a grant program for feasibility studies on municipally owned property with an eye toward housing. So hopefully that's low-hanging fruit for us to be able to grab and finance some help in that regard. I think that's a prudent next step, because while we all talk about preferences for veterans housing and senior housing, which we know is in dire need, to the point of finding out, okay, well, are these the right sites for that are we getting the highest and best use in terms of the return from the city? I know the other half of this question is what revenue will be generated. Well, certainly
Correct. That's
any
what-
revenue will be more than what we're getting
we're
now,
getting today.
right?
Mhm.
Because they're both publicly owned properties. But that will dictate, and the feasibility study will help sort of guide and inform the city as far as what's needed in terms of the type of housing or other use there, and also how does that square with the revenue and generating benefit of that, right? And you have one come at the expense of the other. So I think that the effort to which is underway to get grant funding to help pay for that feasibility work. We've got 2 identified parcels that we know that the council and the mayor are focused on. We should act accordingly.
And to
Yeah.
get it.
So what else I would say is that once that's done, whatever those parameters are, before that RFP goes out, it's going to have to come back to the council for a surplus vote. So you'll see whatever is being proposed. The mayor will file a resolution asking for surplus and for disposal via RFP, and I'm sure whatever plan has been developed will be shared at that point in terms of it. It's a little, so when we say senior and veterans housing, and I know the mayor's expressed a preference for that, it's a little bit dicey. It's a little difficult to actually do that.
And to say
because,
just that's the only thing that's going to be applicable.
yeah,
Right.
and so like for instance, like there's the housing authority. People say, oh well, why don't we just give it to the housing authority and they can build senior housing? Unfortunately, there's a moratorium on any additional state housing authority senior buildings by EOHLC. You can't actually build any buildings. You can build on the federal side, but not on the state side. And we do have a federal program, but there's no real federal money for that anymore. So like that's not really a solution. So it will end up being some kind of private developer who does this. And there are certain ways to do veterans and senior housing, but you can't necessarily exclude everybody else due to discrimination laws. So that's what Mass Housing Partnership is really helpful at, because they specialize in these kinds of things. So to the extent there's a preference and it's they're legally able to direct us, this is as far as you can go, and then, I know the mayor wants to set some parameters based on, density and things like that. Like we don't want a 10-story, project in the middle of a neighborhood. So it'll conform to our zoning.
They're both in single-family neighborhoods.
Exactly. The Pleasant Valley is sort of, to me, it seems like that's going to be a tear down and
Because it's structural issues.
yeah, and a rebuild. So that parcel is a decent size. I think it's like 2 acres. So it's a decent sized parcel.
And we do know there's interest. We've just received cold calls in the past.
Yeah.
I don't recall anything coming in on the Courier, but on the Pleasant Valley, it's obviously more highly visible. But so there has been interest on the part of developers.
So something like the Calumet housing project, is that where it's privately owned, but it's part of our housing stock that the elderly housing, and it stays on the list, and that's who gets to go there. That's the kind of place I'm envisioning that can be there. So that.
Just to add to what Solicitor Mailer talked about with respect to being careful, coming up against being discriminatory, and
Correct.
when you see over 55 housing, so there's more of a likelihood you could get something with respect to senior housing than you can with just veterans housing.
Without a doubt.
But I think this is, again, to go back to this MHP grant and the opportunity for the feasibility study, that'll help inform us as a city collectively about what is the best, highest and best use for those individual parcels.
Yeah. Right.
That stays within the legal guardrails.
And that's what we have to be careful of, because we can't discriminate. Right. When we send out the RFP, everybody scrutinizes it anyway. So that's it for the agenda today. I don't know if the other members have any questions.
Very informative.
Good. Thank
Very
you very much.
informative.
Thanks for the opportunity.
And take you so much for being here with us. It's a pleasure always. And it's always good to know where we're heading and how can we help in the development of our city and, make things more feasible for our constituents and have more availability for them to just come forward and see that we're going to receive them with open arms and help them in any way and shape we can.
All right. We'll set a next date. I'd like to have one within the next 2 or 3 weeks, and I'll call you guys to set in that date. I don't know. No one knows their calendar, right? It doesn't matter right now. So, so I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Meeting's adjourned at 1:28. Thank you both for coming today.